there's a corruption. It has been happening for years.
It is over a year since the COVID lockdown. I am on my way to one of South Africa's most notorious correctional facilities, Johannesburg Men's Prison, otherwise known as Sun City or the Last Resort. It was built for less than 2,000, but now holds more than 3,000 inmates, both awaiting trial and sentenced. I'm responding to a desperate plea from several inmates accusing prison officials of corruption. Most are too afraid to be identified because they will be punished, not only for having cell phones in their possession, but for using them to film inside the prison. But one of the inmates is not afraid to be identified.
Since I've been in this center, I've been paying for everything. The budget is allocated. They don't do anything with the budget for the prisoners. I bought this vest. This is not a prison vest. I've been buying these things. I bought these pajamas. All this I bought it. The sheet, even the sheet that I'm sleeping. I even buy socks. These are not prison socks. I bought cups. These cups, they are bought. We don't get nothing from this center. I even bought simple things, spoon. They are failing to provide. I'm buying everything, even prison uniform. I bought this prison uniform. I bought it with my own money. There is no way you can save time here without operating illegally.
Behind me is Johannesburg's Men's Prison, and this is where Siphelele Khuvani is serving the remainder of a 33-year sentence. Now, he's determined to be identified, and this raises ethical problems for journalists because of the obvious dangers attached to that, both in terms of his safety and because he's breaking the law. But like so many inmates, he's caught in a vicious cycle because in order to survive, he has to comply with a culture of corruption. And in order to expose the corruption, he has to break prison law. Inmates say they have been stripped of their dignity, living in inhumane conditions. In some units, for example, hot water is a luxury accessed by fashioning an unsafe heating element in a bucket of water attached to an electric cord.
You see this plug here? This plug here is about to die anytime because it consumes a lot of heat. Plug here for us to get hot water. And we buy this wire. It's 1,000 rand for us. Now I'm preparing myself to bath. This is how we did here. The water is cold. And here, where you urinate, after you urinate, you have to pour. That's why we put these small bottles. We pour this water here and you do urination.
According to the Africa Criminal Justice Reform Programme, at the beginning of 2020, South Africa had almost 163,000 inmates, the most in Africa. During COVID, 19,000 were released, but those still inside remain vulnerable.
You see gross human rights violations taking place in prisons, and nothing is happening. Nobody's being held accountable.
Although the most unpopular segment of our society, inmates are among the most vulnerable to abuse in an environment in which every second of their day is controlled and their movements monitored. This was especially the case during COVID.
The COVID pandemic has now made it more possible for officials to drive them to corruption in any way.
A former police officer, Pindile Zweni, heads an NGO called SASAPO, or the Sentenced and Awaiting Sentencing Prisoners Organization. Advocating for prison reform, SASAPO has protested for years about overcrowding in prisons, corruption and human rights violations. It accuses prison management of ignoring calls to adequately confront corruption.
Last year, March, whereby I first reported these allegations of corruption, whereby inmates had to pay for their freedom. I reported that via email to the regional commissioner, and she then referred me to the area commission. The area commissioner acknowledged my email, the first one. Then thereafter, it was a total shutdown. They never again came back to me, despite several other emails that I've sent to them asking for their response.
As a recent raid on Goodwood Prison in Cape Town has revealed, the contraband economy between warders and inmates, although thriving in prisons countrywide before COVID, has continued unabated during the lockdown.
Visitors were not allowed during this whole period since last beginning of the lockdown. Were not allowed in prison. So we have proven once again, it was proven, was given, and to the officials themselves that cell phones, drugs, and everything was smuggled in. Now, how did those things go into prison if there were no visits? Obviously with officials.
For the families of the inmates, it has been particularly stressful during COVID. Sipilele's sister Sinclair and his niece Akona were regular visitors until COVID.
He used to tell me that there are a lot of things happening there when we go there to visit him.
They haven't seen him in over a year. Their only means of communication via the forbidden cell phones, because the inmates' phones have been out of order for years.
Our phones are not working. As you can see, even this one, it's not working, out of order.
It's just very difficult. Sometimes at night I used to dream maybe they're in a difficult position. Sometimes maybe I used to ask myself, is he okay? Is he fine? What if they stab him? Things like that. What if they strangle him? And then in the morning I ask him, how are you? And then he, no, I'm fine, my sister, don't worry.
I know for me doing this, it can cost my life.
Initially, they are shocked when I show them the video Sipilele sent me, but they support his decision to expose some of the inhumane conditions.
And I never thought he would do such a thing like
that. I think it would help him.
You've got rights. If there is something that you don't like where you are right now, you have to expose it. Even if people, they will say whatever. For me, I think it's a good decision that you take.
His sister and niece want to visit him. The COVID lockdown has eased, allowing for restricted access. But visitors now have to call the prison to book in advance. But either the phones at Sun City are not working, or no official is available to take their calls. So together with Sipilele's niece Akona, I go directly to the prison. But our presence is greeted with hostility by a prison official who threatens to arrest us, even if we film on the pavement outside the prison. The inmates at Sun City have not only been locked down during COVID, but effectively cut off from normal communications with the outside world. Sipilele Kuvani was born on the 4th of May 1980. His journey to prison was fueled by dreams broken by unemployment, anger, desperation, crime and punishment. He was born in Zola, Soweto. He grew up with 4 brothers and 3 sisters. One of his sisters later died.
Due to those days of an apartheid regime government, my parents were moving from place to places.
They moved to Kliptown, where his father joined the taxi industry. But he lost his job and the family was plunged into poverty.
Mother, she was a traditional healer. She tried to provide until what she was doing as a traditional healer, she couldn't work anymore. She couldn't have customers. The situation started to change. I had to go to school and I had to take care of myself.
I was very young. I think I was 6 years. This is the house it's a family house we used to live all together.
Their father died in 1998, and although a bright student, Siphelele was forced to leave school in grade 11. From Orange Farm, the family moved to Alexandra Township, where the plush suburbs of Sandton, adjacent to Alex, were constantly within sight. Siphelele worked at temporary jobs, a car wash and hawking clothes, while taking care of his unemployed family.
He was the one who was raising me. By that time, my grandmother, she was not working. Siphelele, she used to buy food for me, give me money to buy lunch at school.
Where was your mom?
My mom, by that time, she was passed away.
So in a sense, did Siphelele become like your dad?
Yes, he's like my dad, even now.
But everything changed on a Sunday morning in 2006. In the early hours of the morning, the Kuvani household was raided by Sandton police station's tracing task team, a police unit feared in both affluent suburbs and impoverished streets.
Sunday morning, maybe it was around 5 o'clock. The police came. They started to be aggressive. They take them outside. They were naked. They searched. From there, they take them.
Did they assault them
Like something like beating them. Yes, they did. Because Siphelele asked to go to pee. They didn't want. So there was this other father slapped him with a gun. We cried with my cousins because we were still young by that time.
Together with the main suspect, William Lehasi, the 5 Kuvani brothers were arrested on suspicion of terrorizing Sandton with a series of violent robberies in 18 upmarket complexes. Although he had no prior convictions, Siphelele was denied bail. He subsequently escaped.
What triggered me to commit an escape is that when I reached in court, I was told that I've committed a string of crimes, 21 accounts. And I got caught within a period of 3 weeks, and I pleaded guilty to my escape, and I got sentenced 3 years.
Photographs of the Sandton knife gang were splashed across the media before being identified by the victims. The marathon trial also caused a public sensation and lasted until 2008.
Sometimes I was going with my grandmother. We used to go there to the court till the end.
In 2009, all 5 brothers were found guilty of armed robbery with aggravating circumstances. At the age of 29, Siphelele received 30 years after serving 3 years for his escape.
He's not a violent person. I don't think he was involved in that.
The consequences to the Kuvani family have been devastating.
Life was very difficult because I was staying with Akona and my mother started to get sick. That time I have to take her to hospital and I was not working by that time. So it was stressing. She was very sick.
Siphelele's broken-hearted mother died in 2013.
I didn't finish school because of it was hard. I get pregnant. By that time, I was thinking maybe after getting birth, I'll ask my grandmother to stay with my child. Unfortunately, he passed away. I was 7 months pregnant, so I never go back to school again.
we felt a lot of pain, ne? Because since they were convicted, life started to change from better to worse, because now it's only Akona and me.
Throughout his incarceration, Sipilele Khuvani has maintained his innocence. Without any professional legal assistance, he has lodged many appeals to overturn his and his brother's conviction, but to no avail. The trial had been beset by irregularities, such as the testing of crucial DNA from the suspects, like their blood, hair and saliva samples. Once tested, these samples would definitively link them to the crimes, yet the state never produced this crucial evidence in court, and for years, Sipilele has been demanding the results of these DNA tests.
I fought, I never deviate from wanting to prove that I'm not involved in these crimes.
Despite his limited education, he has gained extensive knowledge of constitutional and criminal law.
That has then given me the love of law. I taught myself law due to injustice that I was faced with. That is why even today I can fight any institutions.
In addition to wanting to expose the abuse of inmates' basic rights, he, together with several other inmates at Johannesburg Prison, are accusing senior officials of attempted bribery. After serving half of his sentence, Sipilele was eligible for release on parole in 2023, but he says he was informed by other correctional officers that the date had been extended to 2024.
Then I approached the unit manager by the surname Mr. who then took me to inquire to Mr. whom upon our arrival, jokingly he said he must search me so that I do not record the conversation that will take place. Indeed, I was searched. He then asked me what is my problem. I then explained to him that my half sentence was changed, but other officials, when they calculate, they get a half sentence of 2023. When calculate, he got 2024. He then told me that he can make this problem to disappear. I asked him how. He said, I must think. Then I knew he wanted something. I asked him, how much do you want? He said, how much can I offer? I said, no, you tell me. He said in Zulu, 8,000, let Maliam. I pretended as if I was okay with that. He then told me I must not come to his office again. I'll give the money to Mr. My own leading manager is involved in this corruption. For me to go home, I have to pay money. I've been paying since I've been in this center. I've been paying for everything.
That is happening everywhere in each and every prison. You will receive complaints from inmates that their release dates were altered on a daily basis. I would then query that, and I would be referred from this person to another person, and they would not give you a definite answer.
The department has denied the allegations.
I find it strange that an arrangement of that nature could push it. Why am I saying that? The system is built in a way that you do not have a single person presiding over what needs to happen. It must still go to our case management office to an extent that then that should be put together to what we then call a profile. Then that becomes like your file throughout the journey with us. And come the time where for parole consideration, then the case management committee again, they will go through this file again now in the presence of the inmate to say, you were admitted on this particular date, your minimum detention period is this particular one. Here's a profile that will be submitting to the parole board for parole consideration. It's almost impossible that one person can go into the system and say change this date.
I hand over the allegations.
That one is something that I'm prepared to take it. We go and check it and provide feedback to say what has really happened here.
But in prison, promises do not always convert to practice.
Of course, as employer, DCS has a right to investigate alleged transgressions by its employees. But that is a very particular type of investigation. It looks at an employer-employee relationship. What we're talking about here is a criminal investigation. Such investigations must be done by independent bodies.
They don't want to do that. They want to work on their own. Why don't they open up these things for the public to know? Because there is lots of complaints. Why don't they open up and prove to us that this is of what they are saying is true?
These types of corruption have been reported, even in Sub-County High Court. Nothing is happening.
And Siphelele is one of thousands of inmates who have resorted to unlawful means to expose the rot inside prison.
Fundamentally, DCS has not grappled with governance and human rights in a process of transformation. If you're asking as the fundamental functions of the department change in the sense that it's producing different outcomes, then the answer must be no. Access to, call them broadly, educational and rehabilitation services are extremely restricted. It is by and large a warehousing function.
Chapter 9 institutions, like the Office of the Inspecting Judge, or JICS, have been mandated under legislation to combat human rights violations in prison. But JICS is dependent on correctional services for its funding, and over the years it has complained of lack of access, a constraint of its investigative powers into human rights violations, and a radical decrease in the department reports of segregations, assaults, and deaths in detention, particularly during COVID.
There is no legal or statutory obligation on the part of the Department of Correctional Services to report cases or incidents of corruption to the Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services. JIGS at this stage does not have the capacity in terms of human resources to investigate incidents of corruption.
The functioning of JIGS is in our Correctional Services Act. At no point, they must be prevented from, from doing their job.
Even though this is mandated in law, the actual reporting has never been particularly good, but it's got even worse now.
There are still many allegations of mismanagement, corruption, and human rights violations that require further investigation. But for now, though, Siphelele's niece, Akona, has been granted permission to visit him.
He's not doing so good because of he's stressed about his life and the things that are happening here inside the prison. So it's a lot of things that's stressing him, but so far he was so happy to see me.
I take my hat off for Siphelele, but we've got to watch closely. If anything happens to Siphelele, we'll take them to the highest court in this land.
Section 10 states that everyone has an inherent dignity and a right to be protected.
But this is only the surface of an alleged cesspool of corruption, and we will continue to probe behind the barbed wire.